The economic impact of most lockdown regulations remaining firmly in place as South Africa moves from stage 4. We are joined by economic analyst Xhanti Payi. Xhanti, such a pleasure to have you with us here on The Full View. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, and good evening.
As a start, I know you've been quite vocal about the labour aspects of the lockdown. How should we negate the economic impact of the virus on the working class when we know already and we're hearing already that there will be retrenchments and just some companies who won't get out of this alive?
I think the main thing here is that we've always had a rather strange way in which we think about how things work or how economic activity works. In that we have always thought the first thing we have to care about is economic growth, and then once the economy grows, then we can create jobs. Actually, it's quite the opposite. What you would want people, and that's old economics. New economics tells us we want people at work, and then when people are working, then in their hands they actually produce things. So I think the main thing is whatever money we've got and whatever resources we have, they should be actually clearly aimed at what sectors can absorb people, where can people work? And I think we've got a great opportunity now, because I think whereas before, I think people would have said we are uncompetitive and all of those things. Now, it's much more difficult. Our borders are closed. South Africans are probably, in an interesting way, competing against each other. And can we do something in which we support economic activities that include the working of people? So the labor relations, and, when the Minister of Finance talks about the new economy, about, protecting workers and their rights, that's a regime we've had for a very long time. Our biggest problem has been implementing it and making sure that we monitor and make sure that all of these things are working. And I think that's the main thing, that our biggest challenge will only be, will have to be, one of the biggest challenges will be that if we are to protect workers, to offer them the real protection in which we put people out there to make sure they are taken care of.
Now, the government is allowing at this point, and I suppose this is the big story coming out of today, is allowing or possibly allowing the sale of cigarettes, but not of alcohol. No scientific reason really for that. But there certainly will be economic implications, aren't there? I mean, health experts on the one hand will probably say, are you crazy? Why would you allow this? And an economist like you might say, this is a good thing. So I'm going to put you on the spot then, Xhanti. Where do you stand when it comes to this? Are you supporting the fact that, the tobacco industry should, of course, be, able to operate again?
The main thing is this. After, when we first had the lockdown, we didn't know a lot. Now we know a little bit more than we did when we started. And the knowledge that we have now has to be part of the direction in which we take. Again, we want people's jobs to be saved. We want economic activity. We want a future. We don't want this to be the end of us. Every time we assess that situation, we've got to say, of course, what is the science that really informs our decision-making in terms of the health issues? And how then do we meet that with the economic needs of the people, right? Because obviously we are no economic agents when we are dead, so that's important. But certainly we can say, look, if there is no reason health-wise that actually means that we should actually cut out the cigarette industry, then we should keep it open unless, the government has adopted what they call a risk mitigation strategy or risk-adjusted strategy, in which they look at all those sectors that place on us the biggest risk of extending the virus. So the important thing then is to say, well, if an industry is not responsible for either endangering people or creating the infection rates. Alcohol is such an industry where people say, look, we need our hospitals open. We know that sometimes we can be a bit rowdy when we get drunk and, fill up the hospitals. That's it. The construction sector is one such industry. We know people in the construction sector work apart. So if you're building a house, for example, people are building houses, they work apart from each other. One person on the other side, they wear masks. So we can think about that sector as, we think about the risk, much more limited. So the point is really to say, now that we know better, how do we do better?
Yeah. Do you foresee a sort of significant change or relief for the economy as we move from stage 5 to stage 4? It's still pretty much, the same. The regulations still remain sort of strict. But, when we're talking about the economy, do you foresee there being some kind of a significant change for us?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, I think the first thing to say is this, that the president on Tuesday night announced some of the relief in terms of financial relief that has been offered by the government. Much of that relief is, a lot of it has been money that already existed, and some new money that might be, coming up from international institutions.
Yeah.
What that means is that for that we still need to actually put in a little bit more in terms of actually impetus, or what we would call input into the economy, to try and actually make sure that as we open up industries, we're going to do more than what that money would have done before.
Yeah.
Because clearly now we are just giving relief. And in some ways, if you think about it, even when the Reserve Bank announced the 200 basis points, the 1% and then another 1%, one of the things that we need to do now is to say, how do we make sure that we put that to work? So move from relief into actually make sure that we are stimulating the economy. So stimulus is one thing, relief is quite another. Yeah. So how do we make sure we do that? And that's going to take a little bit more effort than to give money to the hands of people because they're not getting some money. So we are closing the gap. That's one thing. Now we have to lift that a little bit higher to make sure that actually we're not just protecting current jobs, but we are able to actually make sure that the economy looks different. So I think it's very encouraging when the Minister of Finance was talking and saying we are looking for a new economy. I agree with that. But that's going to require a little bit more boldness and a little bit more implementation than what he actually was talking about, because those things that he has talked about are things that already exist. How do we actually change the mindset and the framework under which we work?
Now, let's talk about that 500 billion rand, Xhanti. The president, of course, announcing on Tuesday that there will be this COVID-19 social economic plan. But, of course, there are questions remaining about it, about will this really work? And, of course, there's a key issue. Some people are questioning whether corruption will come into effect at this point. When people hear 500 billion rand, there's already, people's mouths watering at that time. And then we also have a situation where we have the finance minister saying that we are entitled to get money from the IMF, but we've heard Ace Magashule saying this isn't the way we're supposed to be doing it. We're not supposed to be asking from the outside for money, of course, agreeing with what Paul Kagame has been saying. What do you think about this 500 billion rand and really where it's coming from?
Look, in the first instance, we know the first 170 billion is coming from the readjustment of the current budget that was announced by the Minister of Finance. So that's very clear. And then we have some money that comes from tax relief and certainly from the unemployment insurance fund. So that's the bulk of the money. Now, that money has already been there. And our challenge has always been, how do we make sure that that money is spent and spent well? So if we're thinking about readjusting the budget, so the minister, for example, the president talks about, for example, giving 20 billion rand to municipalities. Now, that's an interesting proposition, right? Because we know that municipalities have not been very good at spending money. They've not been very good at making sure that they roll out programs and that they do better for people because they're the very cold face of our people. So in terms of, they will have all these economic plans that they submit, but many of them are poorly put through or implemented. So certainly one says, how do you then look at all of that and say, how do we make sure that this money is going to be used properly to make sure that we inspire economic activity and we safeguard people and their economic interests? I think that's the main problem that we face now, is that, yes, you can put in the money, you can make sure that the money is available to people, even in instances where, for example, there is more money in the hands of people. Now, how do people spend that money? So we know, for example, that the Competition Commission has been working very hard to make sure that people are not overpricing issues, are not overpricing products.
Yeah.
Because once people see such money, they may overprice, they may take advantage of people. So we also have to close that gap so that that money goes a little bit further than it would have done if people taking advantage. So those are the things that, once we have that money, we have to use it. But I want to agree with the Minister of Finance. The IMF would allow us to have loans at much lower interest rates. Remember, we've been downgraded. We are now at a risk level in which people think they're speculating to lend us money. Yeah. So few people in the world would give us money at reasonable interest rates. The IMF will give us that money. And actually, that is being done at where we can actually even design our own program in terms of how we're actually going to use that money. And they may just monitor it. So I think it's important to get away from the thinking of the IMF of the past. Even the IMF itself recognizes that. And how do we then take cheap money to be able to plug the holes that we've got? We've spent a lot of time, and we know this, we've talked about for a long time, we've been wasteful, money has been stolen, and so we are in a hole right now. And so we need to use lenders that are still willing to give us money that is cheap, because of the situation that we're in. So one was to say the government must then produce and put before the citizens a plan that makes sense in terms of which we can all feel comfortable.
All right, Xhanti, I wish I had more time with you. Thank you so much for giving us your time here on SABC's The Full View. That's Xhanti Payi, our economist, our economic analyst here, just weighing in on the economic impacts of moving, of course, from stage 5 to stage 4 then of lockdown, and, of course, other issues regarding the economy of South Africa as we are in the midst of the coronavirus.